and this video we'll be talking about adhesives and fasteners. So if I can keep these flies off me, we'll get some pretty good idea of what to do in those regards. This ugly sucker has been around here for about a year. I replace this about once a year because it doesn't last very long. It gets kind of absorbs moisture from the air, and it stops being able to be stirred very well. This powdery stuff is the Urea Resin glue. It has to be mixed up specifically pretty close to pancake batter. I know everybody's batter is a little different, but the batter I like works real good in the press. It's almost equal parts water and resin, I think. But you just kind of have to play with it. There's an experiment you have to run. You have to roll that on, put on your veneer, go through the press, and come back out and see if it's the way you want it. And that learning curve takes no prisoners. It's pretty brutal. It took me a couple of projects to really dial this baby in. But once you get it dialed in, that's the only glue you'll ever use on veneer. This glue is CA glue, stands for cyanoacrylate, and it comes in three thicknesses. This is the one you're used to, super glue that sticks your fingernails on when you put on those fake nails, and it's all that same stuff. So it's really terrible on skin, though. It bonds skin immediately. You're not quick enough to resist that bond. So wear gloves when you use this. This is the go fast. This is the accelerator. In some instances, you can smear this stuff on, get it all smeared out. I use a rubber glove and I just smear it on. And in some instances, you can spray the accelerator on the second piece. I say some instances because when these two things touch, it's an immediate bond. You can't reorient it. And so it's real kind of dodgy to say, put this on that and put that on the other, because the minute you touch them together, if it's not perfect, they're there. Difficult to work with, but I like fast. Yeah, well, this one's a little bit looser. It comes out of the jug a little faster. This one comes out kind of like honey. This one comes up like syrup. So I like this one a lot. I didn't even know this one existed when I bought that one. All I had was these two, and that is really good. It's really good for assembly. And when you put the accelerator on it, be prepared to discolor your work, because every time it'll turn white. It just crystallizes immediately, makes white crystals. So if you don't want those white crystals, you can still use this, but put it in on both sides, clamp it together, and then just leave it. You won't get the white crystals. It takes a while. Back to one of my favorites. Okay, this is 24-hour epoxy. You can see it turns yellow with age. That's what it's going to do on your table as well. One of these is the accelerator. This is the resin. It's the accelerator that turns golden. I don't use much 24-hour resin. That's why it turned yellow, because, well, it's age. It's still good. I just don't care, because my wood, a little extra amber on there is fine. Black walnut, to be even darker, is okay. Some people even put a small stain on black walnut, like a gel stain, a black walnut gel stain. Gives it just a little richer look. So there's that you can do, and this is how you clean your hands. This, you need a special remover to clean your hands. That's why I always use rubber gloves. I'm trying to see where my special remover bottle is. It was actually invented to bond skin together immediately. But man, when it burns like heck. I've tried to close a wound with it before, and it just burns like you're on fire. But I guess it's better than bleeding out. So I think it was made for Vietnam when they had to glue a wound together, or Korea or something. But works good on wood.
If you like the videos, please subscribe. It helps me do more videos and bring more content to more users. Thank you.
Hide glue. I had never really heard of that term until I got into building musical instruments. The violin was my first choice. Not really the best choice, but it gets you deeply involved in using hide glue. Almost all musical instruments in the string genre are put together with hide glue. I like to work on 3 instruments at once. When I'm building violins or guitars, I work it on 3s. The reason is, it takes about 30 minutes for hide glue to set up enough so that the parts are fairly safe to handle again when stuck together. And so by the time you've done one little manipulation on one piece and put it together with glue, you can do the next one, and this one is drying, and then you set this one, and then you're working on that one, and by the time that one gets put together, this one's ready to work on again. So you can just keep working. Hide glue is just what it says. It's made from hide of cows. And I don't think it's horses. It could be. But whatever it is, it comes in what they call pearl. And those are little bitty chunks that are dried hide glue. And that hide glue, you have to put it in a double boiler. And there is a little glue pot that the luthiers use. Stuart McDonald has that glue pot, and I advise you to get one. I have one around here somewhere. I'd show it to you if I could dig it out. It's somewhere. I haven't put a violin together in a while. It's probably in my violin box. So I don't use hide glue anywhere except musical instruments anymore. It is a wonderful glue. You can kind of do to it what I do to epoxy resin when I'm mixing that coffee in with it. If you put on too much hide glue in a joint and it's too thick, it has a chance to not stick. But if you thin it down appropriately and get just the right amount in that glue joint, it sticks very well. Besides, one of the reasons why you use hide glue as a luthier is so that you can reverse that bond, because hide glue can be reversed. You can take your violin apart. In fact, if you've ever seen a violin's been stored in the attic where it got wet, you open the box, it's in pieces. There's no more hide glue in it, it's been dissolved. I've put together a couple of violins that were like that. One of them said Stradivarius on the inside. It's one of those knockoff Stradivariuses. I thought, just like every other poor person, that I had struck it rich with a Stradivarius. Well, sometimes I use another adhesive that is not really a permanent adhesive, they say, but on some things it's okay to use them on. For instance, when you have bent work that is, say, a front of a big counter where the counter might curve around in a gentle slope over an 8-foot slope, 8-foot span, with the appropriate plywood underneath, furniture-grade plywood where the grain is really close, and maybe a wood-backed veneer for the front of that, it might be appropriate to use contact cement on that. You're never going to find a veneer press big enough to accommodate that. And if you do, you have to, it's a one-off. You use the veneer press one time, and it's a bag press. You have it made specifically for that item, and you bag it, and that would be the right way to do it. But oftentimes, expediency governs what's right in commerce. And so, yeah, it's okay to use that material, but it's not a particularly long-term bond. It can start peeling, and once it does, you just put some more underneath there and let it sit for 5 minutes and push it back together. You just have to keep doing that. because it's a rubber bond. It's not a crystalline bond like all the others. The very first glue that I ever used was Elmer's glue. It was white, smelled like kind of cowy, I guess. We all tasted it. Yeah, it wasn't like the regular paste you get at school. And it was kind of nasty. And it was really easy to get off your fingers. You know, it dries on your hands, and you can kind of peel it off like you're peeling a sunburn. It's kind of interesting stuff. It sticks wood together pretty good. In fact, it can stick so well that it can pull the wood apart at that joint. What I don't like about it is kind of invisible when it dries, except when you put your finish on, and then it leaves a show where it is. It's a little difficult to detect where it is until you put your finish on, and sometimes that's a no-no, you know. So I don't use PVA. It takes a little too long to dry, 2 hours maybe, 2 to 4. Is really good for construction work. It's cheap, dirt cheap, and plentiful. Home Depot, everywhere has PVA. I don't know the difference between Type Bond 2 and 3, but there may be some improvements there to be had. And I like it for outside stuff, make glue lambs and wherever you're going to use it, not on furniture, is kind of, I don't know. A lot of people use it on furniture, don't get me wrong. They do. It's cheap. But I'm just not one of those. I like to go faster than that. I'm constantly concerned about safety in my shop. I probably should be more concerned about all the dust that's in my shop, but I wear a mask most of the time. And then I also wear a different kind of mask when I'm using stinky glues. I always use a carbon mask. It's the same basic mask, but it has carbon filters that you plug on. And I can't even smell any finish that I use. In fact, I don't want to smell it. I want to be totally oblivious to it. I use it when I use CA glue. I use it when I use finish. I use the mask when I use anything that's going to be other than air. I just don't want to smell all that stuff. And so with the jeopardy of sticking your fingers together, there's also the jeopardy of inhaling fumes that who knows what kind of catastrophe those will wreak inside your body if you breathe enough of them. So don't forget about your own safety. Keep in mind that some of these glues are pretty harmless, except maybe when ingested or breathed too much of. The CA glue is probably the worst. It sticks things together on you you don't want stuck together. And the fumes are the worst, especially when you hit the accelerator. That stuff, it smells kind of good the first time you smell it, but if you've worked with it long enough, even sanding that stuff after it's dried, the fumes will reappear on CA. So you'll get a big lungful when you start sanding it as well. Not so much with PVA glue. PVA glue, it gets on your hands, sure, you can just kind of peel that off. It doesn't really smell. I don't wear a mask if I was going to use that. I use resin. I seldom use a mask on 5-minute resin because usually I just put it on and then I go and take a break. And within 30 minutes, by the time my break's over, that's a good break, isn't it, 30 minutes? By the time my break's over, it's ready to sand, do what I got to do. And 24-hour resin, yeah, I always wear a mask around that. It's not good. I don't use much of it. I prefer to just use joinery. So I guess as you kind of meander through this woodworking thing, you start paying more attention to joinery. Yeah, joinery for me is very satisfying to get these things put together. I still haven't learned how to dovetail yet. I've tried a couple of times, but that was before there was videos. I'm thinking I'm going to try it again, and I've had some encouragement from some of the videos that I've seen online. Some guys showing their work the very first time. They're doing a great job. I used to think a screw was a screw, but nope. I think it's kind of a daunting task to figure out what fasteners to use. Is the shaft too thick? Is it too long? Well, too long is easy to figure out. You can just hold it up to the edge of your piece and see if it's going to go through the other side. You don't want that. There are lots of different kinds of screws. I like to use big, fat shank screws when you're trying to hold big stuff together, like a bed frame that you're going to hide the screws in after you've done your joinery. And I like the big heads because it allows me to drill a small hole and then a bigger hole that countersinks it, and that really allows me to hide that screw in there in a great big plug that I can put in there. There are lots of screw choices, but for the most part, I have done away with the regular Phillips and the regular screwdriver completely. I don't even know where I would find a bit for that in my toolbox. Everything is either a star or an Allen, and mostly star, like 99%. The 25 seems to be the most popular, and these will break. If you don't pre-drill the hole a little bit, you can end up not ever being able to get them back out, and they'll just snap off. A Phillips doesn't stay in, the head of the driver just doesn't stay in the screw. These star things just kind of slip in quite a ways, and they really stay in. In fact, you can put a star on a bit, and sometimes they'll even just hold themselves. This is the star 25, and this is actually a bigger star, but yeah, some of these are 30s. But you see that star goes in there a long ways. So it's not magnetic at this distance. It is way up here, but that is a handy thing to have. I carry everything from 1.5-inch screws to about, say, a 6-inch screw. That's kind of the longest screw that I might use. These are more like a bolt than a screw, maybe for a headboard of a bed, or mostly big, heavy things. The smaller things go for, you screw in smaller stuff. All right, I use the screw that goes in the furthest but doesn't poke through the other side. I don't want a screw that just barely gets into the work. I want one that goes in, almost goes through to the other side. Of course, it's obvious if you don't want it to go through because you got beautiful wood up there. But it's important not to just let it barely get in there. It's got to go quite a ways in there to do anything. So that's why all the different sizes. And it's good to have a selection in 1/2-inch increments. That's what I would suggest. Yeah, I'm kind of agnostic to the thread type. These all have a pretty aggressive thread, but they kind of self-tap, and you do still have to pre-drill in hardwood because you'll split the wood. And I mostly work on hardwood, so everything gets a small pilot hole, about half the diameter of the screw that you're using, and you want to drill it in probably 3/4 of the way of the completed screw. That way you don't get any resistance going in and shift your work around. You can just put it in, and immediately that point acts like a stabilizer, keeping the work from shifting if you go all the way through the first piece. Well, these screws are kind of cool. They kind of countersink themselves. When you drill that little pilot hole, it helps to give this room to countersink. And it kind of has a little countersinking cutter on the bottom of the screw head if you look at it closely. I like to put these in enough so that I can get a little plug in the top of them. Oftentimes you need to secure something and you have no inclination to try to hide a screw, like you're behind veneer and there's no way you can put a plug in that and make that come out good. So probably 9 times out of 10 you're going to go with a nail gun of some kind. I like to use a brad nailer. It's about that long. I prefer it over screws because it's just so much easier to hide. Sure, you might see the end of it, but in a big panel, you're probably not going to see a 22 gauge brad. And anything bigger than that, then you have cover-up sticks to use and then maybe even in a very plain finish, some camouflage work with a paintbrush. To my liking, I prefer to just use joinery. The better your joinery, the less your need for all that other stuff. I like to do saddle joints and butt joints, and I don't really know the name of all of the joints that I use, but I have quite a repertoire of different joints that I use. Maybe I'll do a video on all the joints, not cutting them with Sawzall and just cutting them by hand to show you how I started. I progressed to a Sawzall and the big bandsaw because production work. You know, you only have so much time you can put into your shop, and once you've kind of gotten too much labor into a piece, you don't feel the same about the price that you gave in the first place. So you kind of have to expedite things and figure out a way to put less time into your work after you've done the prototype. I prefer to do a prototype on almost every project except for the ones that are obviously too big, too expensive to do, but maybe a small model would be a good idea. It helps you to flesh out all of the support mechanisms that you have to deal with inside the piece and any of your techniques that may have, I'll say, waned since you used them last. Because we have so many techniques that we use in this field of woodworking that you can totally kind of unknow something that you've learned 20 years ago and suddenly have to go over that learning curve again. Sure, it's easier to go over the learning curve the second time, but that happens to me a lot. And I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or because I've done so many things in the past, but I find that the learning curve is way, way easier after you've gone over it 2 or 3 times from something you haven't done but once or twice 10 years apart. It gets interesting.